Okay. I think we can get started. It's 11 o'clock. So welcome everyone, and thank you for participating in today's session on Indigenous leadership stories of our people, facilitated by Tamara Goddard, who is president of the Ela Hultsi group. Today, Tamara will share with us her teachings passed on to her by some prominent Indigenous leaders in Canada over the last 30 years. She will provide an overview of Indigenous leadership strategies, community, and business building. And a little bit about Tamara. She is of the Sultano Nation and has spent 25 years studying various social and economic systems, finding that many limit humanity's abilities to flourish. With For Our Future, Tamara led multiple national papers highlighting the potential for new technology to advance equitable access to new markets for Indigenous businesses. Tamara received her MBA in Indigenous Leadership and Business at Simon Fraser University and has assisted hundreds of Indigenous businesses and First Nations corporations from startup to stability to thriving. So before I turn things over to Tamara, I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. Just gonna navigate here. Perfect. We'd like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous people of all the lands that we are on today. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. We acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. Please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and consider how we can, each in our own way, try to move forward in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. And so, before I turn things over to Tamara, I would like to share a personal reflection on the heels of this land acknowledgement. Yesterday, I had the privilege to attend the Forward Summit in Aurelia that was focused on empowering Indigenous economies. And in one of the panel sessions that I attended, the speakers, all Indigenous, were asked to share their vision of what a future workplace should look like or be like. And the responses really resonated with me, some being their ability to work in safe spaces and being their true self, where they can come in and not have to play down who they are. The second was not being removed from community and having the workplace be an extension of. But I think the most interesting one for me was this idea to not have to continue educating people and colleagues and decision makers. And so I take that as a personal intention to strengthen my journey in awareness, education, and understanding. And so with that, I will turn things over to our speaker.
Thank you so much for that reflection, Rosa. That was absolutely beautiful. Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming today. My name is Tamara Goddard, and as mentioned, I do come from the Saulteaux First Nation, which is in northeastern British Columbia. We are one of 5 Eastern nations that are in British Columbia, and that is a whole lot of story historically, how we got to be in the East, but essentially many Eastern nations separated from our original communities and came out west. And the purpose of that was to move away from the colonization that was happening in Canada from east to west. So we picked up many nations along our travels from east to west. We stayed, our nation actually now goes down into Montana. And then we stayed with the Northern Cree in Alberta at Spirit Lake. And then we wound up in British Columbia. We have a partnership with the Dene Nation here. And historically, our nations, because we're Cree and Saulteaux, would have gone to war if we had approached somebody else's territory. But instead, what happened is the way we left our territory was because of one of the 7 prophets back east. And one of our prophets dreamed that we would need to move to the east in order to remain safe. And so when we got to the Dene lands, where the Twin Sisters Mountains were, which is part of the dream of my ancestor. We met up with the Dene people, and there was a Dene medicine person who was also dreaming of our arrival. And so instead of going to war, we struck a peace treaty and we moved into northeastern British Columbia. The Dene continue to protect the mountain to the east, to the west, and we protect the mountain to the east. And so I just wanted to share that story. What I'm going to do today is, first of all, I do want to acknowledge that I'm in Vancouver, and so I'm on the beautiful territories of the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam First Nations. These three nations are family to me and consider me family back. So I'm very lucky to be adopted into several nations, and there's part of my story is why I'm a member of so many nations. It'll come out in this presentation. So I hope to bring you through an experiential storytelling session today. There's no way I can possibly explain all of the stories because I've been taught my entire life by some of our most precious cultural keepers who are my friends and my family. And I hope to share some of this with you today. So I'm going to share my screen so that there's some visuals on the screen, but there's not a lot of words. So let me just share. And actually, before we do this, I don't know if you want me to, Rosa, to take it off screen sharing, but I've forgotten that I wanted to share a song before we begin. Maybe I'll stop sharing and then share.
Absolutely.
I'm going to stop sharing. We usually share songs at the beginning of most of our meetings when we're in an Indigenous setting or Indigenous corporate setting, Indigenous events, etc. And the song that I'd like to share with you today is written by Farrah Palmer, who's an Anishinaabeg musician. This song represents calling our ancestors to be with us, and strengthen our path forward. And so I'm going to share this song because it's currently one of my favorite songs, and I sing it to the river about 3 times a week. Wea ha e a, wea we o e a wea. Yahweh ho hea, Yahweh ho hea, we ha we ho hea, we ha we ho hea, we ha he ho, he ha Yahweh ho hea, we o ea ha ea wea ya we o ea wea Yahweh ho hea Yahweh ho hea we ha we ho hea we ha we ho hea we ha he ho he ha ya we he ya we ah. I want to thank you for sharing in that song with me so that you know we normally share our verses 4 times, and that's to reflect the 4 directions and the sacred medicine wheel. And also that's part of our oral cultural teachings. So the way we have oral cultural teachings is by repeating. Whoops, why am I click to exit full screen here? There we go. So thank you. Yes, I'm the president of Ela Hultsi. I just wanted to add before I begin the presentation that to me, Ela Hultsi is more than just a business. It's a vehicle um, for change and for economic and cultural restoration amongst our people. And we'll get to why as we go through these stories here. I do want to talk today about Indigenous leadership, and to do so, I wanted to first introduce you to one of my strongest mentors, Chief Gibby Jacob of the Squamish Nation. Considered my treasured uncle and me a niece to him. So Chief Gibby Jacob is one of he's a celebrated leader in Canada, and he was part of a generation of Indigenous leaders that fought or attended the residential school era and inspire my generation and younger generations. And the reason for that is because these leaders were traditionally trained, and they were trained around the fire. And so he would sit with his grandfather and understand the entire history. And this is where our 7 generations comes in. But as a traditional chief, he was required to understand how our people got to his lifetime, like presence in his lifetime, and what they went through for the past 7 generations. And one of the things that Chief Gibby has done is mentored as many people as possible. I've been very lucky to work alongside of him. Much of his mentorship is done in universities and group settings, and he's a favorite amongst our youth. He started the film Back to the Fire because, in his words, when something needs to be done and nobody's doing it, you usually have to do it yourself. So he's just finished his first episode of this, and I'm just going to share with you the trailer. The purpose of this film is because he's trying to teach our young leaders that are growing up how important it is to acknowledge how they came about the opportunities present to them today and all of the opportunities for education, etc. Oh, can you hear?
No.
Today, when I look around at the leaders of tomorrow,
No volume?
Oh, now we got it.
Oh, yeah, it came on.
It did. Okay.
I'm concerned that they are not equipped with the many valuable teachings and life lessons passed down by our elders.
The sound went off again.
Yeah, my mother brought me here when I was 6 years old.
Sound off again?
It seems like there's a delay or something, but it came back on.
Did it? Well, what I'll do, it's 2 minutes, so I'll play it through, and I think we'll have to deal with it because I don't know. I'm not technology savvy to fix it. So we're going to pray that the sound comes on.
And I spent the next 9 years as a student here.
In pre-colonial times, we had all of these virtues, values, principles to which we lived by. Honesty, integrity, compassion, caring, loving. It's so awesome how our village is still alive. And I really believe that's through my thought, respecting them.
If we want to describe ourselves as victims, that's a choice you make. I choose not to describe myself as a victim. I am not a victim.
I believe that's how we're going to move forward as a people. Nanwakola, talking together.
We're here. Thanks, Mike. That boat went way up.
On how we've been able to take what we've learned, from previous generations and pass them on to succeeding generations. And the things that are right will survive. As society evolves.
As the saying goes, how can we move forward if we don't understand our past? Together, let's go back to the fire.
There's no other way. We got to get to know each other and create a relationship, right? That's what this whole idea about reconciliation is about.
So I hope you were able to hear some of that. Did you hear most of it, part of it? How did that go?
It was a bit broken, Tamara, but I think we got the gist of it, and it does look like an amazing series. So yeah,
Excellent. what they talked about a lot there was not only did our historical leaders stand up, but they stood up because of the strength of their predecessors. And so something about our elders is that they were very, very wise. And one of the reasons why Indigenous people have had such a successful time generationally and why we've been around so long is because teachings are passed down from many generations. And so our success is based on understanding our current environment and how to interact and pivot and change. And so there's a lot in our current modern culture, and climate change is one of them. Whereas I've heard some of our elders sort of chuckle with me and say, you know, climate change has always been a thing. And although we might be speeding up right now, the folly of humanity was creating permanent structures that cannot be moved and cannot adapt to the changing cycles of the earth. So just a different perspective there, which brings us to teaching and promoting time in nature. One of the things that is very important in Indigenous leadership is a sense of solitude and a sense of peace inside. Instead of sort of teaching in a Western way, we will teach peace to a young person and how to manage their emotions and how to bring out the best in themselves in terms of what their talents are and what they bring to the community or what they bring to the world. And as such, I'd say instead of being the teacher, we are facilitators of teachings, and to connect a young person back to nature and give them a strong sense of self, a strong sense of their history, a strong sense of their culture. What we do is we're promoting a critical thinking youth, and what we're passing down is what we know as the elder. And what the youth is expected to do with that knowledge is to adapt the knowledge to the current and modern world that they live in. And so there's a great deal of trust and a great deal of caring. So in a corporate setting, when you're bringing in new talent and whatnot, you do need to understand that the new young people are going to need to adapt that business to a changing world. And right now we see that very prominently with technology. I like to speak about my mother. This is Dr. Val Napoleon. So one of the I met my mother only when I was 19 years old. She came and found me. And she, again, has experienced some of the most horrific histories of Indigenous peoples. And she chose, instead of falling down with that history and with her and I being separated, to become one of the most premier law professors in the world. And so I grew up steeped in how common Indigenous law could be translated into a Western ideology. And when we had Indigenous law recognized in the Canadian court systems as a valid law, we began winning cases. And she's one of the reasons we've won so many cases, and one of the reasons we have so much opportunity as young people in Canada. And when I was doing my education, most of my family are now lawyers. She said, go do economics because we need to translate law into economic reparations for our people. And so that's what I have done. So most of my work is based on Indigenous traditional cultural law. And this is my community here. This is our greenhouse. And this is one of the ways that I have worked with my people. And when I work with my people, I simply bring my education. My people are the one who continue to teach me about our lands. And these are my chiefs and my aunts and uncles that we see here. And what you see is a greenhouse. This is a way of interacting with industry in a really positive way. So we have $90 billion of development on my territory. Most of that is Site C hydroelectric. It is PNG, LNG, mining, so quite damaging to our lands. So the community's response that we came up with collectively was to do a traditional plants nursery. And so we moved into negotiating pre-project to survey the lands and collect the seeds. And so what we do is we store the seeds of the original territories and negotiate the restoration of the land with our own seeds upon completion of a project. Now, some of these projects run 20, 30, 40 years in length. And I think that this speaks to the forward thinking and the long-term thinking of Indigenous peoples. But what we have here with the greenhouse is the opportunity to bring our youth in, teach them of our lands, teach them of the ecosystems of the lands, all of our medicines and all of our foods, all of the animals, etc. And when they go out into the world to study business or whatever they want to study, they have a base knowledge of the territories and how we must take care of it collectively. And beyond that, it might be their grandchild that is actually doing their land restoration, but we train all of our youth through the greenhouse. It's a thriving business of environmental restoration up north, and it is being used as a model. My participation in this project was I write the business models and negotiate with industry for the contracts to restore lands. And I still do that for my nation. So I'm just one small piece, one small part. And it is a nice traditional teaching that has helped me to succeed in my areas in my life and helps me to teach young people, because we tend to think we can do everything and we can't do everything. And so understanding that when you come on a team that you're only there to do your part, it really alleviates a lot of anxiety for young people. When you have a strong leader that understands those parts, that is Indigenous leadership. So for many years when I worked with Chief Gibby, the power of Chief Gibby was to recognize the talents in other people. He didn't expect you with your talent to usurp his job or to be the lead negotiator at the table. What he did was recognize a talent, foster a talent, and as a leader, he would protect his team so that they could bring their genius forward, as a matter of fact. And that's one of the reasons, it is the reason why Squamish Nation is a multi-billion-dollar nation in Canada now, was because of that type of leadership. And to be trained in that type of leadership takes many, many years. I, in fact, am still training to be an elder, which is still 10, 15 years away for me. So I'm on a different level of teaching whereby I can actively use our medicines with young people. And over the next 15 years, as I begin to retire from the corporate world, I will move more into mentoring young people and becoming an elder to them. This building that you see here is of the Seashelf First Nation and is a
Sorry, Tamara.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I don't think you're sharing anything. If you, I don't know if.
Oh, you're not seeing anything?
No.
Well, then I'm just storytelling with myself. Share. The picture I just had up was, this is my nation and the greenhouse that I was speaking of. And so it's a multi-million-dollar business now. I think that's the only photo you missed. This was my mother, in case you had missed that screen. So those were the only two pictures that were up at the time. And then I was on this one here, which is a beautiful example of architecture encompassing the values of a nation. And again, with the Seashell First Nation, I just lent my business skills, my development skills, and wrote this for them. The result was that they got a $7 million grant with a $7 million takeout fund and 50-year support agreement with the government to manage a low-income housing project that enabled the building of this structure, which is both commercial, retail, and residential. And the difference in a project like this was again coming together, myself with the entire community. And so it was every single department, how would they manage it? I'm just doing the little bits like financial ratios. What can they afford? How do we alter this so that they can afford to own this building themselves and provide generational support to their people? And as you see, some of the unique aspects of this building are a public space where the community and the tenants can come together in a multi-purpose room with a commercial kitchen. And so what we have in a building like this is an entire community. So the young people are learning good cooking habits. They're learning to prepare healthy foods for themselves. They can also utilize the commercial kitchen to provide catering for the many events in the community. And then the designated spaces in a building like this range from young people who are becoming students, single parents. So it gives the young people an opportunity to save money and build a prosperous future for themselves. And it gives the elders an opportunity to be the mentors they're meant to be. So they have the low income housing, they might be with disabilities, and really you have 4 or 5 generations working together within this building. So this is a lovely example of how we keep our communities together when we're enabled the opportunity to develop things ourselves. It would be much different if a non-Indigenous developer came in and just sort of put up a space. In this case, the community input everything they wanted to see in this building. It's owned by the community, managed by the community organization. And it allows Indigenous leadership and circles to be together to ensure future generations hang on to those leadership styles. I want to point out the leadership of sorry, not chief. She's not a chief. She's from the Sechelt Nation. This is Gina Jackson. Gina Jackson's worked with hundreds of our Indigenous businesses over the years and is also trained in Indigenous leadership. Something I want to add with the Indigenous leadership training is that it seems to be our generation, we're Generation X, for lack of a better term, but Generation X, we are the children of the residential school, and many of us are 60 scoops and even have experienced some residential school ourselves. So we really had direct access to the elders and the elders of the elders. And we're a smaller part of our generation. And to give you an idea of Indigenous leadership in Canada by statistics, out of 5% of all of Canada, it's changing now because our young people are educated. But when I was coming up and starting my career, 50% of our people were under the age of 25. Now 50% of our people are under the age of 35, but they're educated and they have experience. But at the time, 0.07% of 5% of the population had the education and experience to be able to do the business development, business partnerships, and economic development in Canada. So it was a very, very small percentage of folks that were trained. And we, at the time, there was no conversation about the environment. There was no conversation about supporting one another. And without the elders working with us directly, we would never have had the success that we are currently having now as a group of Generation X folks. So what Gina's done here is she's sharing with the world through storytelling. Our people are storytellers. And she's sharing with the world the aspects of Indigenous business and how prosperous it can be, not just for our people, but for Canadians as well. So this is a TV show that's on Aboriginal People's Television Network. And Gina Jackson, I don't know where she's at now. She's helped thousands of Indigenous businesses to succeed. And that doesn't just happen through grants and whatnot. That happens through, I think sitting with her is Chief Louis of the Okanagan Nation. They are a multi-billion-dollar nation now. So it's happened through learning and then teaching and holding hands and all the conferences. You said you were at the Forward Summit. Our people come together, and that's a basic teachings is that we will succeed together. We're in a time in the Canadian economy whereby with the economy being a bit shaky and the government changing around quite a bit, regulations all over the place, that we are in a beautiful time for Canadians and Indigenous peoples to utilize the strengths of both. Canadian businesses sort of have many years and size on their side, and Indigenous folks in Canada have a lot of land, a lot of young people and talent coming up, and a lot to input in terms of negotiations and rights that can be swayed to the benefit of both Canadian and Indigenous businesses. I think that we are in a very unique time to put the strengths of both together and rebuild this economy. And that seems to be what I see happening. Candace Campo is a language speaker and cultural keeper of the Sechelt First Nation. The Sechelt First Nation had 3 language speakers left when she took it upon herself to relearn the language and developed an entire education system so that now it's taught from school and onward. As a profession, she's one of our Indigenous artists for the Four Sacred Medicines collections. She's a national treasure. And she teaches young people. We both takes them out on the land, out in kayaks, And together, what we understand is that to understand Indigenous culture is to experience Indigenous culture. And so it's difficult through sessions to really get a grip on it. However, I would welcome more corporations to look at the deep storytelling of our people. Candace is also an anthropologist, so she understands the relationships of families, big houses, who went to war, who didn't go to war, how many people were kidnapped by the Haida Nation, why the Sechelt elders, run to the beach and say, "Hey, pick me," because historically the Haida Gwaii and the lower Coast Salish nations would war, and the Haida would always come on raids to steal the women. Over time, they made peace with this difficult past, and now they've come to a point of humor and come back together. And so when I say that now the Sechelt elders go to the beach and they get all dressed up when the Haida are coming, because they're saying, "Hey, pick me, let's go with the Haida men." So it's a beautiful teaching that our people will always come back to a place of peace. We will war when war is happening, but nothing cannot be solved. That is another testament to the role of colonization in Canada and how different the Indigenous peoples in Canada are. Because although today we do see a lot of protests, historically, there's been a lot of suffering of our people, but there's been a core group of people that have held on to our traditional teachings that tell us to relax. We're taught to laugh. No matter how stressful a situation is, we are always taught that you can't think your way forward if you're going to be stressed out, victimized, and traumatized. We have to do our own healing in order to come to a place of calm and come to a place of laughter. And so historically, our traditional stories teach us if you are going to complete an impossible task, and I don't have enough time to tell you all the full stories, but if you're going to complete an impossible task, which might be gaining back the lands that had been taken from us over multiple generations, I'd call that an impossible task. When you are about to achieve an impossible task, you go and have tea with the elders. And when you go and have tea with the elders, you do not tell them about the impossible task. You do not talk about your troubled times. You do not talk about the difficulty. You have tea with the elders and let them storytell to you. And the goal is to have tea and laugh. And because when you laugh, you open up your greatest mind, your inspired mind. And in an inspired mind, you can see your path forward. And it's considered that when you can be inspired, you can complete impossible things. And Candace is very much a life teacher of these lessons. Because when she takes people out onto the land, they do have these moments where they understand they're reconnected with nature, and people cry and people laugh, and all doing so while talking about difficult times. I just wanted to I want to keep my eye on the time, so I think we're okay, and I could story tell all day. This painting is called The Medicine of Women. And because we are in a time of such high diversity where everybody's sort of I'm not going to say stumbling, but there seems to be an ever shifting change in the gender roles of folks. And so in some Indigenous cultures, they don't even have a term for gender, and I'm referring to the Haida Gwaii in that case. What you're seeing here is called medicine of woman, because women have a specific medicine, and that is to hold many aspects in place. So what we do is women are tasked with understanding the matriarchal relationships of all peoples in the communities, territories, and the lands that they belong to. So men are much the action orientated. There is a lot of talk and a lot of teachings about gender in Indigenous culture. We have women's ceremonies, we have men's ceremonies, we have way of honoring both. And the reason why a two-spirit, or I guess the term is LGBTQ plus these days, was so honored is because when they were born, they were seen to have two spirits. There are other teachings, such as what would be considered autistic in today's world is a person in their own place and time. And so they are also healers to our people. So there's always been LGBTQ, there has always been autistic people, but in an Indigenous leadership style, We are simply looking for the way that the person contributes to the community. So it doesn't matter what color, creed, what your beliefs are, if you're different, you're always seen for what you bring to the community. And Two Spirits historically have brought a lot of care into our community, but they still don't go into the women's ceremony, and they're still separate from what the men are doing a little bit. So they are in their own place. And that is the place where they did a lot of the caretaking of many of our elders in the community and provided a lot of medicine. So let's say in a women's during a moon time, the women would go into a lodge. They would be serviced by the Two Spirit. So they would be cared for like medicine by the Two Spirit, but they would not join in the moon lodge, inside the lodge. So I wanted to point out these differences to you. She is managing the stress in this picture with her drum. The drum is a G chord, and that is pulling up the vibration. And when I say vibration, what I'm referring to is that our people will say that every place on earth has a heartbeat. What they're referring to is the actual frequency, the Schumann frequency of the earth. So it's why we have sacred points on earth. It's where the ley lines meet. And when our people stand on these ley lined or sacred areas, they developed songs that are thousands and thousands of years old. Those songs have come from the earth, from paying attention to the earth and paying attention to the sounds of the earth, and the very vowels that we speak of are in resonance with the land that we stand on. So sometimes people will say, or I will say, our people are expert prayers. We pray well. We pray well because we are not just praying on a whim with a desire, but instead we are understanding our knowledge, we're using our voices, and we are moving with the earth in a way that communication can happen with something that is just beyond what the human can comprehend. And so inspiration is a joining with the creator, or with the energy of the universe that guides us, and it's our battery. It's why we live, because of a unique energy that we still have trouble identifying. And when you begin to understand that and resonate in your highest way, it's easier to move forward. We look at the world a little bit differently, and I think that most people want to look at the world this way. It's in the interconnected way. If you do business with an Indigenous community, they will say, we are family. We are family because now you are feeding my family and I am feeding yours. But as Canadians in Canada on Indigenous lands, and vice versa, what we have is a partnership here. So instead of, sort of needing to have mandates or needing to have these things, what we have is the opportunity to come together and relearn. And we do, as Indigenous people, want to show the beauty and prosperity of the land that we are on. And so this is a different way of thinking. This model has been used in many negotiations with First Nations people, so that we don't just wind up with very small royalties that we often don't get paid. This has been used widely now, and I believe it's being published in a book by a young Navajo doctoral student. And so it's showing 4 aspects of land wellness and 4 aspects of people wellness. I didn't make this up myself. This was from literally 20 years of research. It is the key themes captured by working with thousands of Indigenous peoples across Canada over a period of 20 years. And this was always the key themes around how we are successful in generational wellness and prosperity. And I can, because I'm cognizant of time. So do we want to go to questions now, Rosa?
Yeah, we can do that. I know there was some comments in the chat, but I don't think there are any questions. So maybe we can open it up. Anyone wants to maybe raise their hand or put a question in the chat for tomorrow, that would be great.
We could do that. Well, so if you have questions, just go ahead and ask. I think most of you know the carpet story, but I just want to sort of reiterate a very why this is according. So the carpets are according to this economic strategy right here. And so what we have here with the Four Sacred Medicines carpet was, I think it was 2 years of planning, whereby we really took the stories and patterns and we did the opposite of cultural appropriation within this story. And so when you have Western economics blended with Indigenous storytelling and an economic model whereby you're sharing back, what you get is an iterative project that will grow over time. And that's what's happening with the carpets. So these four artists, as you know, created four beautiful paintings. And those paintings have been filmed. So each artist is filmed and their story can be told. Plaques are made and they're being installed where the carpets go in. And when people are walking on this carpets, they're actually walking on patterns that are tens of thousands of years old. And we've got many testaments for people that it gives an extra energy to the carpet. But here's an example of we give back 5% of the carpets to a charity. The charity is now overseen by the original artists, and they ensure fair payment of royalties. Whoop. Just had a phone call come in. There we go. And so the sharing of these stories is from each person's nation is permissed, and that's something that doesn't happen. And then with the royalties going back, what this is doing is giving the artists an opportunity to have a base pay. And so royalties for the carpets might wind up being, say, sort of 5 figures. And then we have a retail line going out that's allowing us to bring on more Indigenous artists. And in the US retail, you know, a royalty might be up to 6 figures. What this gives artists is the opportunity to have some residual incomes coming in. And why that's so important is because this story was last told by my great grandmother. And until, you know, unless I had painted it, it wouldn't have had a painting in a modern era speaking about how medicine came to our family and the teachings of tobacco. David Fierro, same thing. This is teaching about the movement of our ceremonies. So he's not allowed to paint a ceremony exactly, but what he's done is he's painted the movement of our people, the fire, and what it winds up being is a toroidal field. And so our people will move in energetic patterns as we dance and as we pray. And that's one of the reasons we become expert prayers. Candace Campo from the Sechelt First Nation recreated the basket weaving on the bottom here. That basket weaving was done by her grandmother, Mary Point. Now, Mary Point used her baskets to feed up to 20 Sechelt Nation children. Candace is also from the Chippewa Nation. Her father's Chippewa and her mother is Sechelt, just so you know. But what we see here is that Mary Point is still feeding the Sechelt Nation people and developing and contributing back, even though she passed away about 6 years ago. Her basket has now been made modern, and money is now coming back to the community through Mary Point's beautiful basketry, represented by Candace Campo in this painting called Hoham. It's Sister Cedar. And there's another quite long story about why the cedars and the frogs are so important to our environment. The cedar tree would be our tree of life. The basket is representing, and Candace's cape that she's wearing is representing all the tools that the cedar tree gave to us in terms of basket weaving, clothing, food, medicine, cedar tea, and the frog in every single environment on Earth is always the first creature in a forest to sing or to change their behavior if the environment has been disrupted. So that's why it's called Sister Cedar. It's an earth teaching. And if you want to know if a land is well, you can look to the frogs. Ameria Carrier has shared a 10,000-year-old song called Waniska, which is our sunrise song. It's a 10,000-year-old song that honors that the land is ours everywhere that the sun's rays touch, and we give gratitude for the land and take care of the land as it takes care of us. This is the medicine of sweetgrass, and sweetgrass is the third medicine on the medicine wheel. but it calls our ancestors. So it said our ancestors will hear, will smell the scents and come to provide strength. So before I go off onto another tangent, I'm going to stop sharing because I could just talk all day. So I want to make sure that if folks have stories or if they want to provide any feedback or commentary of their own on what they've experienced, that would be lovely.
Hey, Tamara, I just want to say thank you from all of us for sharing these stories of leadership and not only your community, but your own leadership and experiences. You've been through a lot in your life. We've learned a bit about yourself as well through this. And I do want to just reinforce how lucky we are to have you leading Ela Hultsi and being a part of, frankly, BGIS's success in sharing. I don't have any specific questions, but I'm hopefully there's some thoughts and questions from those that have joined today.
I just have one comment just while we're waiting. I also want to say thank you, Tamara, because you said earlier about change, and I really feel like you've injected so much change into how we do business. And it's really been it's really a carry on too from the incredible work that Wade's team has done. And I really want to thank you so much for changing and influencing our business. And we continue to do so. So thank you so much. I'm just so proud to display some of the artwork that you described in our offices and use that as an instrument to communicate and educate different people that come by our offices. So it's really more of a thank you because you're absolutely, without question, influencing our company and our business and how we do business. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll just jump in, Tamara, too. And I just want to say I really enjoyed it today, too. And actually, it was really nice to learn about some of the successes that you were portraying as well, too, and some really influential figures that I didn't know, too. So it's just amazing to me. And just I think what it gives me is hope that we can actually get there, right? Because obviously there's a lot of success already under your, Indigenous broadly belt, right? And I think we can, we can get there too as a business. And no, thank you. I really appreciate it. It was great. I learned a lot.
Awesome. And I'm so happy about that. And I had a friend show up the other day at one of our events and he just all of a sudden started professionally filming everything. And so I still feel very, I have all of the support of BGIS and friends, but the entire Indigenous community that I know just seem to be showing up, and all of a sudden I'm having this sort of film produced with like people just show up in our world and chip in and do things right. And I'm very excited to be able to show what Cliff has come up with for storytelling. I do believe, I think some of the little film storytellings will do a lot for us.
Tamara, will you be able to share some of those pictures that you showcased today?
Yeah, I mean, I can share the presentation. I've got lots of folders if you want to have the presentation, but if there's any pictures you want specifically, I could create a folder for you whereby they might be more accessible.
Okay, maybe I'll work with you on that because
Yeah.
I know I would like to access some of that, and I'm sure some of the team will as well. So awesome.
Yeah, I've got a good media folder, Rosa. I'm happy to share that with you.
Awesome.
Hi, Tamara. My name is Raphael. I just want to also jump in and thank you for the very interesting and inspirational presentation you shared. I'm quite interested in the idea of being an expert prayer. And I'm wondering if some of those prayers may be shared with us for us to learn and maybe practice.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that with you. I don't know how to do that. It's easier in person. because there's different, for example, a round dance is something that we share with everybody, and the songs of the round dance. So there's so much, because we do praying on the land. And so we go down to the river. It's really like we'll do prayer in other spaces as well. And I love where you're going with that. And I whenever anybody comes to Vancouver, by the way, I took Lori out on the land when she came. And so, you know, if we can take you out on the land, that is the best prayer that you can have, if you can stop and listen and witness the land and be with the land. And I took venture carpets for cold swim in the ocean. And it was so interesting to me because they've never done a cold swim before. And when you bring prayer into it, we do smudging, we do singing, we do, you know, teachings as you're getting in the water. And when you're getting in the water with teachings, it teaches your mind to think about the cold differently, because our bodies are made to withstand nature. And we live in such comfortable environments now that our bodies have become a little bit weakened. And so cold swimming is one of the ways that, if you understand when you get in the water, the very nature of the water that you're getting in, and that your body is meant to withstand that, what you're doing is it feels harsh in the moment, but it's not nearly as painful to get into cold water as it is to live every day with a hyperactive nervous system. You know, 1 minute of I get in the water and it feels very painful for 1 minute is going to alleviate and reset the nervous system so that your entire body can become at peace.
So interesting. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
So any other questions? We have a few minutes left. It's like we're good tomorrow. I think you did a great job. Very, very insightful as always. And I'm so happy we were able to bring this to the organization this week. So I thank you for your time and your inspiration.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. It makes my heart very happy to be able to share some of my teachings.
Great. And with that, enjoy the rest of the day, everyone. And we will be in touch with some of the links to some of the paintings. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.